Very good morning to all you ladies and gentlemen. Uh, I kind of echo what Kumar mentioned in his opening remarks uh, about the changes, challenges, priorities that the HR function has to play today. And when Lawrence had asked me, saying, "Can you please address the audience?" I said, "I don't come from a HR background. I've led a lot of companies where people are a very key and integral part of the organization. But then when you come to think about it, you realize that when you talk HR, it's not about HR alone. It's about the fact that you are talking about business. And when you talk business, what you do realize is that there is, on the one hand, you're building a business which is built around a brand. It's built on a certain promise that the brand offers, which is communicated widely in the form of advertising. And then after that, you have this entire promise which needs to be delivered to the customer. And what you do realize is that the people who actually deliver it to the customer are the people in the front end. So whether they be a dealer's salesman, whether your own company stores and the people in the stores, whether it's those who are in the contact centers and who are interacting with customers, they are the ones who actually translate all that the brand stands for in terms of its promise, and they actually amplify the brand's personality. So when you think about it, you realize that business is about people, especially in the services industry. So I then reflected back on, which are the companies which I'm involved with, which have a lot of people and where people actually deliver promises. And then I realized there's one tech company on whose board I am. There's a school company on whose board I am. There's a construction or a real estate company on whose board that I am. And then when you start thinking about these companies, then you realize that the people in each one of these companies, though they play different roles, actually end up being resources, clearly, one, but then trained to deliver differently. So on a tech company, LTI Mindtree, we have about 90,000 odd employees. And when you think about it, it's been a factory style recruitment, training, deployment process. And then what you're actually doing is where the costs are 68% of your revenue, which is just the people costs, and all the other overhead costs are only 15% of the revenue. You actually are trying to figure out an arbitrage model around the people that you have. So the numbers, the skill sets, the grades that they are in, the salary levels that you pay them, and how can you translate that resource into a productive output which makes sense as far as that customer is concerned. So that is a key and important task. So of course, within this comes how do you recruit the good people? How do you ensure that you're able to train them well so that they are capable? How do you ensure that they don't leave you after training so that your cost of attracting and retaining people does not go too high? How do you ensure that you continuously build capability? And then I realized that that's the same as retail. On a school company which is Lighthouse Learning, our biggest assets are what we call school leaders or principals, the staff, the teachers, and then, of course, a whole bunch of support staff in the corporate office. So then when you look at it, the only person that the student or the student's parent actually meets up with is the school principal or the school teacher. So as far as they are concerned, the decisions on which school to go to, whether I should continue to keep my child in that particular school, other than, of course, access and convenience, is all dependent on the way they have an experience that they have of the school, which is actually exemplified by the principal and the teacher, and the confidence that they have in the principal and the teacher to be able to entrust the future of their child in those people's hands. So there is a lot. Now, what do you train principals and teachers on? And actually, at the end of it, you realize that you have hired them for their domain knowledge and skills, but you're training them in terms of how to interact with students, how to interact with parents. And how do you ensure that you're building the brand in your conversation with the parents, while at the same point in time giving the parents the confidence that they can entrust their children in your school. So here again, when you really look at it, in addition to, of course, making sure that you get people with the right attitude and with the necessary domain skills, you're actually training them largely in the area of how to be able to interact with people. Then when you look at another company, which is a construction company in Bangalore called Brigade, a large number of the workers that they hire are people from the eastern part of India, which is typically Bihar, Orissa, Assam, those areas, who then move across the country as migrants, come and work at different kinds of work sites which are there. And then when you look at them, what do they have? They have the knowledge that they have two hands, they are able bodied, mostly men, a few women. They really are not skilled. So, a large part of the work is in training and skilling them in terms of how they, how they can actually construct well. And then once you've trained and skilled them, you realize that they need to go back for the harvest season in their villages. And when they go back, which is normally once a year, or sometimes they go back for festivals like Diwali, or sometimes they go back for occasions like voting, etc. Then when they come back, there's no guarantee that they'll come back to you. They come back and they might go to some other site, many of them employed by contractors. So contractors move them from one site to the other. So here again, what you've done is you've spent time and effort in terms of skilling and training, but you've created a talent or a resource which then doesn't stay long with you. And then you figure out that, why should I then invest so much time in skilling and training? But you realize that if you don't invest time on skilling and training, you probably run the risk of creating defective buildings. So, there is a balance between, and all of us face the same thing. In high attrition domains, even in retail, for example, the attrition level between, say, grocery business versus, let's say, in a jewelry business is so very different that you have to evaluate whether there is value in skilling, training, etc. So these were some thoughts that went through my mind, and then I said, how do we put all of these? So most cases, what I've seen is finance, HR, technology, all of them don't occupy front seats. They all occupy back seats. And when I say back seats, what I mean is that the organization decides what needs to be done and turns around to them and says this needs to be done. Now, in many cases, they don't influence the strategic direction or the objectives of an organization. They actually support it. So what tends to happen is that at the beginning, there's a very, very important thing in terms of understanding the role of a HR function, which is alignment. How do you make sure that you strategically align with the objectives of the organization? Now, I have seen retail change over the years. And early days in Titan, we put up exclusive stores, which were run by the company and then run by franchisees. A lot of the effort used to be in terms of recruiting talent, because those days, modern retail talent itself was very limited. So who do you recruit from? You have to recruit from the outside. And when you recruit from the outside, then you're layering capability on top of raw talent. So you layer the capability, you build them up, you keep them within the organization. The competition for talent was also limited because there weren't too many companies in the organized retail space. So because of which you didn't have any challenges in terms of largely retaining your people. Then slowly the shift happened in terms of, hey, we've got them, they're staying with us. Now how do we get them engaged? So then it became about talent engagement. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them motivated, happy? How do you keep them abreast of what is happening in the company, and how do they serve the purpose of delivering that brand promise to the customer? Then after that part was over, then you realize that some of these people are not going to remain till retirement with you in the roles that they play. So you need to actually figure out how to be able to, embed them with better capabilities and give them leadership development opportunities. So then you started focusing on those aspects, which was in terms of building leadership development capabilities within the organization and training some of these people, grooming them in order to be able to take on leadership roles. So it might have been storefront to store manager to area manager. Many times it was from franchisee store to company store. Many of them moved from store to becoming trainers who would then handle a whole network of stores. So there were several things like that. Then, of course, you had modern retail come in, Shoppers Stop and Lifestyle and Pantaloons, and then, of course, after that, Reliance Retail. And so a lot of the people lost some of the talent to others who were coming in and competing for that. Today, that thing has changed quite dramatically. So what first change that I've seen happen is that a lot of us in the retail industry started losing people to D2C companies, which were actually selling largely online and didn't have really a footprint of stores. And then when they started moving from online to stores, and that's a reality that happens in any D2C company, that you start first, you're online, you get to a level of about 300, 500 crores, depending on the kind of industry that you're in, and then you realize that you're hitting a barrier or some kind of a limitation, because what happens is that in that context, there are only about 250 to 75 million customers who actually buy online in India. You might have about 800 odd million who are accessing the internet, but a much smaller number actually buy online. Since it's a much smaller number buying online, what tends to happen is that you need to put up a physical footprint in addition to your digital footprint. So then they start putting up stores, they start pinching people. Then what you realized is that many of these online companies realized that the whole buying function, which was largely driven by technical people, would help if it were to be actually manned by people who come from physical retail stores. So you then started losing, talent from a apparel company to maybe a Myntra or an Amazon Fashion, and those kind of places which were there. Then, of course, now what you're seeing is that you're seeing quick commerce. And quick commerce so far has largely been in the area of products. So you have quick commerce, 60, 70% of that is in food and grocery, another 30% is non-food and grocery items, homeware and stuff like that. So you're beginning to see that. And when you're doing quick commerce, structurally it's the same as any e-commerce company. The only difference is that you have delivery, which needs to happen faster. So you have a separate system for that. But structurally, you're doing the same thing. You're manning it. You're trying to make sure that you get marketing monies from the brands which are present there. All of those aspects, which continue to remain the same. And now, of course, the new things which are coming up is in terms of quick services. So we have Urban Company, which is in the services industry. But today people I want a cleaning service in 15 minutes. I want somebody to be able to come in and repair this in 20 minutes. Now, when you have e-commerce, you had slotted delivery. So if you ordered on Big Basket 3-5 years back, you would discover that you can slot your delivery for, if you order in the morning, sometime in the afternoon, sometime the next day, depending on your convenience. When it came to quick commerce, they slotted you. So they said that, okay, we will deliver, you order, we will deliver in 20 minutes. So they kind of reversed the entire slotted thing. Similarly, with Urban Company, what you're saying is that you again get slotted services, which means you can choose your slot. And now with the new trend towards quick services and not products, what you're beginning to see is that they will also slot you. So we are in a world which is instant gratification. And we need to understand that with that instant gratification, we will actually start losing people to several of these new opportunities which are emerging. One. The second is that as a business, we will also need to start reinventing ourselves. Otherwise, what will happen is that over time, we will start chasing or becoming a bigger and bigger player in a smaller and smaller part of the overall retail market. So today, if you were to look at online, online is roughly in the region of about 17% or so of the total retail market. And of that 17%, about 4% is currently quick commerce, and the balance 13% is e-commerce. But what we know is that the quick commerce segment is growing the fastest. E-commerce and quick commerce put together are growing faster than modern retail. Modern retail is growing faster than traditional retail. So obviously over the next 5 to 10 years, you will find that there are different structures which will emerge out of an Indian retail market, which today is about $1 trillion, and hopefully in about 5 to 6 years will become about $2 trillion in terms of size. But each one of these segments will be significant. So one of the large challenges that we have today is to be able to hold on to the people that we have. One. Secondly, strategically, if the company decides that it needs to pursue a slightly different strategy, then obviously we will have to figure out how to skill our people differently and how to then deploy them in these new business models that we will have. The third is, and I think Kumar alluded to that, was about technology. And what we have seen today is that those who join us are not in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They're in their late teens and 20s. And when you think about them, they're not from the top 10% of India's households. They are from the bottom 80, 90% of India's households. So yesterday I was just sharing with the tech team just a simple statistic. 12% of India's households, which is about 340 million households in India today, about 12% of them actually contribute to almost 60% of the income of India. And the balance 78% contribute to the 40% of the income of India. So the people you're getting are not from the top 12. They are from the bottom 78. And when you talk about people of, let's say, the millennial, Gen Alpha, the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha generation, which is likely to be joining you, what you do realize is that their conversation, their comfort with technology, all that is very different from what you might think of even ourselves or even older employees. So then, while you might be comfortable with iPads and laptops, they've never experienced that in their life. They're comfortable with the mobile. So for them, the mobile is their world, their vista to the world. So everything that they do is on the mobile. So whether you think about it in terms of connectivity, in terms of communication, whether it's in terms of the entertainment that they watch, everything is on the mobile because that is the instrument that they are used to. So when we think about, how do we engage with them, how do we ensure that they can actually log in to the company's HR system? We've got a portal, they can get onto a computer, look into it, but that doesn't really work for them. In the retail business, they are in a distributed environment. They don't have access to a computer. The only thing that they have access to is a mobile. The other thing that a lot of people today are comfortable with, earlier we used to call it portals, today we call it apps, but then employees and people and consumers also are getting more and more comfortable with apps. They don't want open-ended portals kind of structures. They're looking for specific apps. So if you ask a young Indian today, what is the kind of newspapers that you read, you will find that they don't even identify with any of the physical newspapers. They all have their own little apps, their own little feeds, which allow them to be able to see the kind of news they want rather than the kind of news which is printed for everybody. So they're all choosing. So in that context, when you think about young employee behavior, we have to think like them to make sure that they actually feel that they are attracted to us as an organization, to retail as an employment opportunity, because there are many more employment opportunities which are there, and also to be committed to the kind of purpose that each one of us in our retail business is attempting to be able to create. So there is that whole challenge in terms of making sure that we are targeting the right people in the right manner. The second is in terms of the way we train. And I'm just taking two or three of these things. When we think of training, classically we used to call them, take them to a classroom, keep them there for 5 days, 7 days, etc., bombard them with 8 hours of PowerPoint presentations, monologues, hardly any interactivity. And then at the end of, 8 days or 7 days or whatever, you then give them a quiz, you select a few who pass the quiz, and you say that these are the people who actually qualify in our training program. But that's not the way they learn. That's not the way they're actually interacting today with the rest of the world. They're all interacting in bite sizes. And their bite sizes are not even the length of a 3-minute video. Their bite sizes are 30 seconds and 1-minute videos. And that is today the reality of Bharat as opposed to India. And when you look at the young Indian, they all look at videos and phones. And the big trend which is happening in terms of media are these short 30 seconds and 1-minute videos. So that's the way they actually interact. You cannot hold attention for a very long period of time, which means that when you train, do you do it physically or do you do it digitally? If you're doing it digitally, what is the form in which you will actually use to train them? How do you ensure that your long-term objectives of training and skilling is actually maintained while adopting a slightly different and probably an unconventional way of being able to train them? How do you then ensure that when they move from one place to another, one format to another, from one role to another, how do you ensure that you actually build upon what you've created as a foundation with them? So there is that aspect which is in terms of training. The third is in terms of actually engagement. And, when we think engagement, we think engagement in terms of, say some R&R activities which are there. How do we ensure that, people are recognized? A few of them are actually, brought to a central forum, rewarded, and all kinds of those aspects. But it's not one who makes an organization. It's not 10 who make an organization. It's all of them. So it's important to recognize those who come up to the top, who are the cream, but you also need to look at the rest of them who support that cream. And that is an area that we all need to start thinking about. In distributed organizations, how do you create engagement for the body politic as a whole while recognizing and rewarding a few at the top? So there is that whole aspect which we also need to think about, because lifespans of employees in organizations are getting increasingly shorter. If earlier you prided yourself, let's say some of our parents would be working in, PSU organization. They say, I joined as an engineer and I retired when I was 62. But today, that's unheard of. So when you think of a young person, this is, I've learned 3 years, I've spent, I'm going now, I want a new opportunity which is there, which is reflected in also the way they actually live their lives. They don't want to buy assets, they don't want a car, they don't want to buy an apartment, they prefer rental as opposed to ownership, because they want the mobility. They want to delay the time at which they get into a family because they want to avoid that strong responsibility which is there. So there are ways and means in which we have to make sure that in terms of attracting them, giving them the rapid growth opportunities, skilling them across different aspects. And I was just speaking to Sabaratnam today in the morning. One of the things that we do is nobody's ever typecast in Titan as a HR person. Could be in HR today, tomorrow you'll be in something else. The third day you might be in some other role that you have, because each one of them is treated for the capability that they have rather than the domain expertise that they wear as a label. And that's the way you will have to be able to figure out how to create growth opportunities within organizations. It means breaking a lot of the conventional models, but it also means that you think people rather than think organization. So these were just a few thoughts that I'll share with you. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best during the course of the day. Thank you.